forget the shirt. I don't know who this guy is. Let's just say his wife bought him that shirt. Alright, so first you want to connect your dual action polisher to the extension cord, and I do it with a figure 8 locking motion so it doesn't repeatedly pull out as I'm moving around. So you can see here, that's how you lock it in and connect it to the extension cord. Now the main thing is, there's a few main things. Make sure you take off your watch, make sure you take off anything of jewelry nature that could scratch your paint, and also be very mindful of the extension cord that doesn't hit the paint. So I'm going to show you again to easily do the figure 8 to lock that extension cord to the small whip cable, the little pigtail power cable. You don't want it to come undone while you're walking. So you loop it over once, pull it, and then loop it back over again, pull it through, that locks it in, and then plug it in. And then make sure you put this cable over your shoulder so it doesn't slap the paint. That will scratch. Now you can see the paint here is quite pristine. It's the original paint. I used a clay bar on it. I do a clay bar at least once a year, and it really only takes 30 minutes to do the whole van with a clay bar. Just make sure you lubricate it. Now I'm putting the dual action pad on the dual action polisher, and then I'll show you which compound I use. It's the Maguiar's. It doesn't scratch, and it takes the place of a really high grit sanding pad, which I'd rather not use. So as long as you make sure that your polishing pad is clean, there's no debris on it, then you can use that, and it works, in my opinion, just as well as a sandy pad. So I touch the paint in a few different points so it spreads evenly. If you just start with the polish on one pad and start the dual action polisher, you're going to find that it doesn't leave an even coat. It just kind of blobs. Alright, so here I have enough spots, and I'm out of direct sunlight, so you don't want it to be in direct sunlight. It'll cake on there, be a lot harder to remove. Alright, so I'm going to put the camera right on the dual action polisher right now so you can see how it looks as I go. And you'll probably see now that there's some imperfections in the paint when you look directly at it with a spotlight. This makes it a lot easier for me to see, which areas I haven't evenly coated. It also works well when I have the buffer, so I can see which areas I haven't removed the dual action cleaner polish from. Alright, so I'm going back and forth. The drill is on, and I just want to make sure I get a nice even coat using the dual action polisher. Stay away from the headlights, stay away from the black trim. It'll discolor it, it'll make it white. It's a pain to remove. Try to stay away from the inner seams. That's also hard to remove. Now I know I'm going kind of crazy here, not perfect even strokes. Yeah, I'm not an artist, I'm just getting this thing polished so I can get on with my day. I do this, at least once a year, ideally every quarter, and you have to make really like a Sunday afternoon out of it if you want to do it properly. Wash the van, then the clay bar, then the glaze, the sealant, the wax. So the windows, that's for another time. The windows, you really want to be careful not to use a rag that has oil on it. You can see there's some glue left on the door from a door strip I took off. Keep it off the numbers, keep it out of the seams, and then just go back and forth. And the dual action polisher, you can just kind of keep it on whatever setting you find to be optimal. I'm not going to tell you what I think you should use because it depends on your pad, it depends on what you're using as a dual action cleaner polish. Again, I like the Maguiar's. Alright, next, to remove the compound, I use this buffer. Now it's from Harbor Freight, so it's Harbor Freight prices and Harbor Freight quality. You could definitely do better in terms of quality. And I keep the pads that I just used along with the buffer pads in a separate bag. Those are the dirty ones. Those get washed, and they get washed separate from your clothes. Your wife will probably literally murder you if you wash her clothes with your car washing rags. And then I keep the clean pads in a separate bag. So I'm putting on a clean pad right now. and it wraps around the foam pad that stays permanently attached to the buffer. The pads, the buffer pads, they start to break down, the elastic breaks down. Now don't do this, don't do that. If that thing hits the ground, throw it away. They're cheap enough, especially Harbor Freight. So new buffer pad, put it on. Don't turn on the buffer if this thing is not against the paint, because these things will fly off and it probably will ruin it. You don't want to take the chance that you have some sand, some debris that gets lodged in the microfiber pad, and then you're just rubbing that at high RPM against the paint. You're going to get swirl marks at best. Okay, so the pad is on. It's pretty even. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Just make sure it's seated on there. And before you turn on the pad, make sure it's against the paint so it doesn't fly off as I demonstrated. Okay, so once it's against the paint, turn on the buffer and then just do slow, even strokes. You can hold it in place for a second or two if the compound has caked on there a bit, but again, this is why you don't want to do it in the sun, and you don't want to leave that ultimate compound on too long. It makes it increasingly more difficult to come off. I know it looks like it's loosely on there. It's good enough. Harbor Freight, again, Harbor Freight prices, Harbor Freight quality. Go with Makita or DeWalt if you want something that costs more and gives you, well, proportionally improved quality. So I'm going back and forth. If you don't have a buffer, you can easily just use clean microfiber rags. I find that this is obviously easier, and it seems to leave fewer streaks because it is kind of a random orbit. Again, loop the extension cord with the power cord like I showed you so it doesn't keep getting unplugged, and wrap the cord over your shoulder so it's not slapping against your paint. Because this is a 2014 and it's 7 years old, the headlights, they need to be maintained. The lens starts to get cloudy, starts to get a little bit yellow, and I found that the Maguiar's kit really does seem to help. So I just polished these headlights. They were looking really frosted. I started with the two-step. It wasn't good enough, so I moved on to the heavy duty, and this one really did help. I know it only lasts about a year, but it just takes like a couple minutes per headlight, and it comes with everything you need. So that makes a big difference. Now you can see the finished product. The paint looks like a mirror. The dogs were helpful with absolutely nothing, but they do want to get praised for all of their help. And that's it. Thanks for the support.